If you tend to like breakouts a lot, I have bad news for you for this week. It's the last one. So your breakouts are only Monday and Tuesday. And as I said last week, breakouts are really where we dive a bit deeper into particular topics. Today's topic is... What's today's topic? And did anybody see? It's ES6. It's ES6. It's in the game. Right? We got ES6 in here today. We're going to find out what the heck ES6 actually means. I'm going to do this in two ways. First of all, you're very lucky today. You're very lucky today because this is pretty much the only lecture, maybe one of two, pretty much the only lecture that I have slides for. I made these slides back when I really wanted to be like Carl. And Carl uses slides. Like, he's probably using slides right now. Yeah, what a guy. Look at that. Who does that? You know how long it takes to put slides together? What? And my slides end up looking really ugly. I can't pick colors and stuff. So we're going to learn all about whatever ES6 is. We're going to work somewhat look through here, and then somewhat through me having a bunch of code ready for us, or maybe like we'll code this code up together actually, and then we'll go through and we'll change it a bit and explore what ES6 means through that. So topics, I guess, our topics are going to be what is ES6, the JavaScript ecosystem, ignore bullet point 3, and then some new ES6 features. Right? We might talk about other stuff as well as time kind of permits. So, ES6, also known as ES 2015, because why not? What do numbers even mean anymore? Right, so ES6, ES 2015, ES stands for ECMAScript. And you're like, ah, yes, of course, ECMAScript. That explains everything, right? ECMAScript is somewhat related to JavaScript. Okay, so ECMA stands for the European Consumer Manufacturers Association. The easiest way to explain this is, remember how I talked about HTTP this morning being like an agreement between people? Right? When those people get together, like we need people to actually get together and have those agreements. They're like a standards association, and they're very much like, I don't know if you know that's not them, the Greybeards in Skyrim. They're just a bunch of people who get together and they say, ah, yes, an HTTP request will be followed by an HTTP response, right? They sit there in Sweden or whatever, like wherever they are, and they write their stuff, and then everybody else just kind of agrees. And they're like, all right, if you say so. And a bunch of them got together and they said, we are ECMA, the European Computers whatever association of people. And what they do is they get together and they decide what their imaginary language ECMAScript would be. This imaginary non-real language. It's like a bunch of people getting together talking about, oh yes, Dothraki grammar. We've decided they should have a new conjugation for groups of people that have more than 7 people in it or whatever. It's stuff that doesn't actually really matter. It's not a real language. Nobody's using it. But a bunch of nerds get together and argue over it. And then they put out a document. They put out a document and they call it ECMA. ECMAScript, this imaginary language. But somebody could look at that imaginary like description of what this language could be, and they'll actually make it work. They'll take the idea of like, this person says, oh yes, ECMAScript should have for loops, right? Like, okay, you just saying that it should have for loops doesn't make it happen. But another person, like somebody at Google or somebody at Mozilla, might go, okay, your imaginary language ECMAScript should have for loops. Well, let me create a thing. I'll create a program that you can talk to, and you can tell it about for loops, right? Or I'll make a thing that you can talk to and you can tell it about variables. So what we're seeing here is the difference between the specification of a language and the implementation of a language. I want to be really clear that this isn't something that you're going to need, like that idea isn't something that you're going to need for doing web development yet, but the idea will start making more and more sense over time. So ECMAScript is the specification of this imaginary language, and JavaScript is an implementation, right, to actually make that language come to life. Right? So the ES standard, ES5, the 5th time that group of people put out a document saying this is what ECMAScript is, that was in 2009. And the 6th time that they did it was in 2015. So ES6 was 2015. That's a long time. It's a long time to pass before they come out with a new standard for the language. And the first question that pops into my mind when I see, oh, there's a new standard for a language, is like, why did we even need that in the first place? Right? What was wrong with the original standard? So I've broken it down to 2 points. Point number 1, we find better ways of expressing ourselves over time. Right? We find better ways of expressing ourselves. So a language should evolve with that. Right? Let's put this way. If somebody asks me how the Earl Sweatshirt show was, Carlo went to it. For the most part, it was all right. Oh, Earl Sweatshirt was okay. I don't know, it got a little weird at the end. But I could sum up the entire emotion of that experience in one word. I could say the Earl Sweatshirt show, I'll say the ending was whack. That was just, it was just whack. And that one word is a better way of expressing my feelings because we've agreed on what that means. Maybe not all of us have, but you get the idea. Slang has a place in language. The other thing is that the problems that we face change over time. So there was no reason for us to have the word cell phone until cell phones became a thing, and now we need a word to describe what that is. Or ghosting, or other kind of stuff that appears over time. New problems, we come up with new language. The same thing happens in web development. A lot of things changed between 2009 and 2015. The internet got faster. New, React became popular, right? jQuery became less popular or whatever. All kinds of things changed. So maybe the language itself should change a little bit to make it easier to deal with those new tools. Okay. So that little bit of motivation, I'll say that ES6, being the new entry to the language, right, is going to introduce a lot of little things. Right? A lot of little things. You don't need to buy into all of them. You might as well just know that some of them are out there and choose to use some and not choose to use others. So JavaScript history. Fun fact, JavaScript didn't pop out of the blue. JavaScript is actually influenced by other languages. Scheme, Python, Perl. So if you like working with JavaScript, you might like working with some of these other languages, right? Don't pigeonhole yourself as, I'm a JavaScript developer. Chances are you'd probably like some other ones too. JavaScript was originally invented for Netscape Navigator, a browser in 1995 by Brendan Eich. So I wrote Brandon, but it's Brendan. Brendan Eich. The idea was, websites at the time were really just HTML and CSS. Now, you're just looking at a page and it's wow, look, it's pretty. But the people who were making the browser, Netscape Navigator, said, hey, it would be cool if we could have our websites not just look like stuff, but also have some interactivity. Or maybe also have them do some programmatic stuff, right? Maybe manipulating text and all that stuff. So we need a programming language to embed into the browser so that it can read some code and do stuff with it. So Brendan Eich hopped onto it, built a prototype of JavaScript in 10 days. Cool. right? So whipped out a pretty garbage language in 10 days by ripping off stuff that other people did. And this idea blew up, right? People really loved the idea of having a programming language built into a browser so that you could do funky interactive things with websites. So, in their infinite wisdom, they, like those clever people, they decided to name the language JavaScript because there was another language called Java, which was popular around the same time. It's like if at the same time as like One Direction is really popular, I put out like a punk album by my new band Two Direction, right? Like, no, it's not even the same kind of music, but somebody might accidentally buy it. Somebody might accidentally think that, like, oh, this is probably related. Java and JavaScript, not related at all. They're used for different things. Okay. I've said that there is a language. The language is a thing that we talk in. But in the same way that me saying English stuff is hitting your ears and then being interpreted by your brain, we need a program that reads JavaScript code and does stuff with it. So your code that you write, like console log hello world, it doesn't actually do anything. It's text. Somebody needs to look at it and feel it and just go, okay, I'm going to print the words hello world to the screen. And that's what we call our engine. Right? That's our program that runs the thing. It's the engine. There's many engines. There's one called V8. There's one called SpiderMonkey. These are, again, just different programs that can look at your text and do stuff with it. So the people who work at Google or the people who work at Mozilla, they'll look at the ECMAScript standard, and then they'll implement that standard into one of their engines. So Google makes V8. Mozilla makes SpiderMonkey. And then that engine can be used for different things. Say that I want my browser to be able to interpret JavaScript. I might put into my browser the V8 engine. And that's what they did with Chrome. Right? I might put the SpiderMonkey engine into my browser. And that's what Firefox has. We deal with JavaScript in two different places over the bootcamp. One of them is the client side, right, which you haven't done a ton of work with just yet. You can start doing a lot of it next week. And the other side is the server side, right, the back end. So Node.js runs on the V8 engine, right? There you go. So we have this idea of a JavaScript kind of standard, right? This is what JavaScript should be. And then somebody implements it into a program so that we can talk to it. And then over time, people come up with more and more and more things that they want to add to the language. So the people who do ECMAScript, they might say, hey, I want to come up with a new kind of for loop. And then it's up to the people at Google or Mozilla or wherever they're making the engines to take that standard and actually implement it. And that can take some time. Okay, it can take some time for that stuff to happen. So, that being said, here are some of the features that ES6 introduced that you can use now. Right? We're going to run through them. I have slides, but I've decided that what we're actually going to do is we're going to live code like a little project, and then we'll go through and we'll refactor it using new like JavaScript ES6 stuff. Sound good? Cool. And then what we're going to do is do like a bit of a review of everything we've seen. I do also want to stress, don't feel like you need to use every single thing that we do today. Right? This is very much like Nima's. Did I already make a joke about doing 720s and whatever already? Okay, this is the same thing. I'm flexing. I'm like, look at all the stuff you can do with JavaScript. Just pick and choose. Do a couple of them. All right, so I'm going to hop into my notes here, and I'm going to make a file called we'll call it script.js. Script.js, and I'm gonna hop into actually doing stuff with it. So hop into actually doing stuff with it. Here it is, script.js. It's a nice, clean, empty file. And as I did this morning, I always like to start off my programming by going, hey, let's just console log something empty and see if anything happens. All right, so console.log, blah, 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 blah. Then we go node, script.js, and it went blah, 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 blah. And that's good. So make a list of the things that I want to eventually talk about, which are the for of and for in, let and const, string interpolation, arrow functions, destructuring, objects, and spread syntax. Okay, so I'm going to start off by not having any of those things. I'm going to make an array var people equals, and I'm going to say var people is Jane, Bill, Sal, and Brian. Here are my people. And maybe as part of my code here, I want to loop through all the people and print out everybody's name. For var I equals 0, while I is less than people.length. And then I plus plus. I want to go through and I want to console.log people I to get the particular person. And I can test this out now, and I run it. And I got Jane, Bill, Sal, and Brian right down here. Maybe I want to print out a nice little message. I want to print out a message. So I might say, hey, var message equals hello plus people I. How are you today? And then what I end up writing in here is we'll console log the message itself. So I get hello Jane, how are you today? Hello Bill, how are you today? So not only am I looping through stuff, but I'm actually doing something interesting with it. Now, I might accidentally, as I'm trying things out, I go, oh, console log I in here just to make sure that, like, okay, my I value is good. And as I'm cutting and pasting stuff, I'm going to say that I accidentally left this down here. This, like, commented out code. Just imagine I made that mistake. Have you made mistakes like that before? Like moving stuff around and just leaving it? Never. No mistakes in my code, right? So I've made, like, a little bit of a mistake. And then let's say this down here, I want to go the first two people, var first person equals people 0, and then var second person equals people 1, and I want to console log maybe with a function. I'm gonna make a function that says you make a function here that says function say hello to best friends, right? Say hello to best friends, and this one's gonna say hey console.log hey friend A, hey first person. And then I'm just going to get really intense. I love you. Just, maybe that's a little too intense. I care. This is the way you talk to, like, your friends. And then, hey, second person. we should open a joint checking account. And now I want to say hello to my best friend, so I might go, hey, say hello to best friends. Just have a bunch of code. Right? I'm just kind of live coding a bunch of trash. And I run this now. And I get, hey, Jane, I care. Hey, Bill, we should open a joint checking account. Now, I might also want to make another function. Say I want to get how many, did I call it people at the top? They're going to be my friends. How many people I have in my list. So I might have a function called get people length. And this one here might go return. I've called that thing up there people. So maybe return people length. I'm going to console log get people length. Okay. Again, I'm throwing out a bunch of stuff. I don't need you to fully understand the context of what's being built or why I'm building it. Right? All I want you to see is like I've written some code. And it ends up doing some stuff. Whoops. Get people length with parentheses. It ends up doing some stuff. I'm going to show you that as we look at this code, we're going to be able to work through it and make it a little bit cleaner, and maybe in the process even understand that the code works a little bit better. I'm also going to do this. I went back to that little mistake that I made and I accidentally uncommented it. Console log I. There's no I in scope here. There's no var I. There's a var I in the for loop. Let's run this. Get out of here. How is there no error? How is there no error? So there's all these like little mysteries, little things that I want to explore. Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to do here as I clean up this code is I'm going to look at the for loop. So for loop is a classic thing that we have to deal with in programming. We start from one number, we want to go to another number, we increase by 1, cool. Now, so often we have to for loop over arrays. Can you put up your hand if you've had to for loop over an array before? Look at that, awesome. You know what? Why do I have to say all this stuff? Why do I have to say, well, I is less than people length? Come on. Let me just say I want to loop over all the people. This feels like too much. And eventually, the screams reached the people at ECMA. Every time somebody had to write a for loop like this, they would scream. And the people in Europe heard it, and they said, okay, you know what, fine. We're going to say for var people, maybe people index in people. Or for var I in people. If that makes you happy. And now when I run this, my code still runs fine, but I don't have to worry about weird what do I need more semicolons for? Right? Come on. And that's the point. That's the point of new features in JavaScript is like, hey, listen, we hear you. We made it a little bit better. Right? A for loop, if you're looping over everything in an array, you can now write it as for in. Now, this here is looping over all the indices in the array. So if I console log what I is I. When I check it out over here, I is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3. But, fun fact, there's a for of. And for of is I is Jane, I is Bill, I is Sal. So what do you think the for of does? It's the value rather than the index. So when I see for var I in, I read the in as index. Right? Just to be able to remember, I read the in as index. And if I see of is going to be the particular element. So generally, I'll write this out as for var person of people. I just like writing it that way, so it's singular of plural. And then everywhere where I was going people square bracket I can change that to just person. Right? I can change that to person. And I run this now and, no, stop. I ran into an error. What error did I get? I is not defined, because further down in this code here, add console log I. Okay, so I am for the moment going to keep this here right now, and we'll talk about what this is going to be in a second. Okay, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to make a new version of this that is script bad.js. Or not bad, script not refactored. So right there we've shortened a little bit of the code. Right? Keep in mind, every change that is done to a language is done because hopefully it makes your life more convenient. Part of that involves fewer keystrokes, but part of it is also going to involve legibility. Things might not be clear to you immediately, but over time, I promise you that you're going to like these kinds of changes. So we've got for in. Fun fact, I'm just going to do this at the bottom. If I had a bunch of like things in an object, so var obj equals 1 is a. We're not going to do numbers because numbers are going to get confusing. We're going to do var obj, a is hey, and b is sup, and c is word. A bunch of different things. If I wanted to loop through each of these and print out what they are, what I used to have to do in JavaScript was go object.keys to get the keys of the object, and then go through a whole process of that. Y'all look like you had to do this. So what I can do with new JavaScript is I can go for var key in obj console.log key. Right? So down at the bottom, I'm going to see A, B, C. Right? Nice. Get to use my familiar for loop. If I wanted to loop over not just the keys, but the values, my intuition would be to go for var key of, but you're actually not allowed to do that. Right? What we can do, though, is we can use the key to go obj square bracket key. Right? Does that make sense? There you go. So does this feel like something you have to do in TinyApp? Yeah, cool. There you go. So you can use that in TinyApp. Looping over objects. Again, this is going to be in the notes that I'll send you. Okay. I'm going to comment this out again. And we're going to make our way back up here. So we have the for on of and the for in check. Right? Just nicer for loops. We're going to talk about let and const and no more var. Okay, so I'll hop into the browser to show you what this looks like first. So var is kind of weird. var is kind of weird because when I go for var I equals 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus, and in here I go, oh, console.log I. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. Why does I still exist? It just does. Var is stupid, and at the end of a scope, a var is just gonna like, whoop, just kind of hop right out of the scope. It's like a lingerer after a party. You're like, hey, I don't really want you around here anymore. My intuition would be that after finishing the loop, I shouldn't have I anymore. Unless I made the variable outside, unless I went var I and then afterwards I said for I is 0, whatever, I would like my I to just be contained within the loop. Unfortunately, var just doesn't work that way. It's not broken, It's just the way that the people who made JavaScript decided it should work. Instead, JavaScript introduces a thing called let. If I go for let I equals 0, I less than 10, and then I++, then console.log I, everything in here works exactly the way I expected it to. But then when I try to go I, oh my god, not iframer, give me I, there you go. When I try to go I, it gives me I is not defined. Right? So let is going to respect the scope nicely. So I kind of lied last week when I did the scope stuff, and I said that everything gets destroyed. Everything gets destroyed if you use let. But if you use var, things will actually just kind of hide and show up again. So var is confusing. It doesn't behave the way that a new person in JavaScript expects it to. It doesn't behave the way that any programmer in other languages would expect it to. Beyond that, here's a little example. If I have console.log dog name, when I press enter, what do you expect to see? So I actually get an error. Right? JavaScript is going to say, hey, dog name is not defined. So since there is no dog name, I can't actually do something with it, and it'll give me an error. This is fine. Right? If you try to console log something that doesn't exist at all, it should give you an error. However, this here is weird. If I go, let me just go to a new page so I don't get a bunch of those. If I go console.log dog name, but in the line right after it, I go var dog name, dog name. In the line after it, I go dog name equals spot. When I run these two lines of code, one after the other, what do you think should happen? Undefined. Right? Undefined. We're like, what? but I said it's spot. Also, I had never defined dog name before I tried to use it. Why did it not give me an error? So what happens with var? What happens with var is that without your permission, it does this. So var dog name equals spot coming right after the console log. Var, it takes this part and it goes whoop, and then it takes this and it hides it without asking you. So the code that I'd written was the code that I written was this, but I end up with this. This behavior is called hoisting. I don't know if you've heard the term hoisting before. What hoisting means is JavaScript, without your permission, without asking you, like, hey, is this what you meant to do, is going to take this and it's going to move it to the top. But it'll only take the declaration. It won't take the assignment. Again, very confusing. Why would you want this? Apparently, in 1995, people like Brendan Ike thought, yo, you know, it'd be super cool if our language did hoisting. Oh, that would be awesome. And a bunch of people just high-fived. And then 8 years later, the hangover just kind of wears off. You're like, what? Oh no, this was the worst idea. Our code doesn't make any sense. Right? So with ES6, what they've said is, listen, let's just use let. Let does not do hoisting. If I tried to over here go console.log dog name, and then after it I went let dog name equals spot, JavaScript's gonna say, listen, like, I can't use it before you initialize it. I can't do this in this order. What I need you to do is actually do it in like the opposite order. Right? It's okay, it's angry at me right now because I already made it, but it's gonna want me to do it in the opposite order. Does that make sense? Does let kind of work the way you thought var worked? So let works the way you thought var worked. Var is trash. Don't use it. So anywhere where I'm using using var in my code here, anywhere where I'm using var like this, I might change this to let, or I might change this one to let, and this one to let, right? And make my way through all of these. Oh no, what is that? Okay, we might make my way through all of these vars and change them all to lets. The thing is, JavaScript now also gives us another thing to deal with variables. It's not just let, but we also have const. So const is going to be like a more rigid version of a variable. Meaning if I have const dog name equals spot, and then I try to say dog name is actually dog, I can't think of dog names, it gets angry at me. A const says once you've made a const, once you've assigned it, you cannot change that assignment. If I've said that this is a const, I can't take it and move it somewhere else. Right? So I'm not able to do this. This is good for us though, because there are times when I don't want to accidentally change something. There are times when maybe I have const pizzas equals pizzas is cheese and pepperoni and pineapple. And I don't want somebody to be able to go, ah no, the pizzas is mushrooms. Ugh, only mushrooms, what? So I have this safety check in here. This safety check in here that says, hey, nobody can replace the pizzas. Right? If somebody tries to do that, JavaScript itself says no. What I do have, though, is the ability to change parts of it. For example, I can go pizzas.push. I can go pizzas.push mushrooms. And now when I check my pizzas, I have cheese, pepperoni, pineapple, and mushrooms. So I want to stress, const means you cannot reassign. Right? So this is illegal. But const does not say that you can't change. You're just going to have to do it the way that that thing lets you change it. So for example, arrays have some methods that let you change them. Or arrays let you index things. Like I might say the first pizza is going to be anchovies. That's legal. Because the string inside of the array is not a const, right? Pizzas, the array itself is constant. It's going to take you a little while to get comfortable with this, right? Don't stress about it too much at the moment because it's not actually going to be a huge deal yet, right? But mess around with it and see whether it tends to work for you. What I'm going to recommend is that all of your code, instead of using let, so this used to be let, instead of using let or var, go ahead and try to always use const as your first thing. Make every new variable a const. And if there's, for some reason, so say I have var best friend, not var, const best friend equals whoever was that person, Jane. And then later I want to change my best friend to Bill. And I realize that my code doesn't work because I'm not allowed to reassign a constant. This is where I then go, oh, okay, well, I guess I'll change this to let. Does that make sense? So for right now, just use const every time unless you have to use let. Should you ever use var? No. Never again. You can wave bye-bye to var. You're going to see var in like old documentation and stuff like that. But no new code should have var in it. Cool. Are we good to leave this part behind? So can you still use const on for loops? That's a great question. So instead of me using this here, did Yeah, instead of me using let in here, can I use const? And the answer is absolutely. Because the thing is, I'm not the one doing the reassignment here. There's just a new one being made every time for every loop. Yeah, that's going to be maybe a little bit different if it was a for const I equals 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus. I actually haven't tried this, so we'll see. Console.log I and see what it does for us. So it looks like it gets angry at me in this style of for loop. Whoops, sorry. In this style of for loop, it gets angry at me if I use const, but I can use let. Great question. Sweet. So we're going to continue making our way down here. What we've talked about right now is let and const. Check. Right. String interpolation. String interpolation sounds a lot funkier than it really is. All it means is I look at this thing and I don't like the fact that there's pluses in it. I just don't like it. With new JavaScript, what I can do is I can use the little backticks. I can use the little backticks, and what the backticks let me do is write my message without having to do the funky plus stuff. So it lets me write this string all at once and then just embed the little bits of information that I want. Right? I like calling these like do you know what a cow emoji is? It's like these like Japanese emoticons. They're like this is what they remind me of. The little backticks, they're like cute ticks. Like strings are really serious, but one of these I was like, oh, look at how cute that little tick is. Right? They're friendly, they're not bad. These strings are here in JavaScript to make your life easier, right? They're just, okay, well, if I wanted to go, hello person, how are you today? And then I wanted to, how is, and then in here maybe I wanted to say person today. Just a really weird sentence to ask somebody. Hi, Tom. How is Tom today? This is already getting weird because I need to use pluses all over the place, and I end up making mistakes. But this, I could just go is $curly person. Right? And that's nice. So when I do this now, my code works fine, and it says, hello, Jane. How is Jane today? Right? Which is fine. Another thing that these strings let you do is if you were trying to console log something on multiple lines, like console.log, wow, so, not source buffer, so cool. Just like stuff that happens on multiple lines. Console.log gets angry, or like a string gets angry when you try to make it like that, right? So var message equals all that stuff. It's not a real string. If I wanted to do this in single quotes or double quotes, I would need to do like \n just to go on a new line. Console.log message. I would need to do \n to go on a new line. And this would end up looking really weird. So instead, I could do this, but with backticks. And that's actually a real string. So if you wanted to write your strings nicely like that on multiple lines, then that's good. Right. Again, fun thing that they just threw in there for you to have a better time. Okay, so I might do that for this. I might also do it for this one here and change, hey, first person, I care, and also do the same thing here and go, hey, second person, we should open a joint checking account. And I need to end with the backticks as well. Whoops, invalid or unexpected token at. Good call. There we go. Whoop-ow. Okay, now, string interpolation, check. String interpolation is what I call, or what we call, syntactic sugar. It's just stuff that they've added to make your code a little bit sweeter, like a little bit easier to write. It doesn't actually change anything, right? It's not a whole new concept. It's just, oh, you didn't like that syntax? Here's some nicer syntax. I want to talk about arrow functions. So some people have already asked me about what arrow functions are because you've started seeing this stuff. You seen this? Cool. So an arrow function is just another way of writing a function. Last week, you saw me do this. You saw me write var, maybe hello equals, and then I went console.log hello. Oops. Where I was saving anonymous functions into variables. And I said that that's the pattern that I'm going to start using a lot of. Arrow functions. Right, I'm going to write this as a const just because I'm not going to use var from now on. Arrow functions, you're just going to take the word function and delete it. And you're going to put a little arrow. And that's technically it. If my function, like if I had a function add, so const add equals a function that took maybe a number A and a number B, and over here went return A plus B. I could go add 3 and 4 and get 7. But if I wanted to, I could write this as an arrow function and go add arrow is delete the word function, put in a little arrow, and technically add arrow for our purposes right now is just going to work the same way. The reason that arrow functions are popular and the reason that this thing is nice is because if you happen to have a function like this that only has a single return statement, developers said, like, what do I need to write the curly braces and the word return for? Why don't I just shorten this? So a shorter syntax for this is to get rid of the curly braces and get rid of the word return and just say, when you give me A and B, I'll give you A plus B. And this is nice for when your function is really just one line long. Right? That's it. That's all arrow functions are. For now. So in a couple weeks, first of all, it might happen next week. Chances, like very, very low chances that it might happen next week. But definitely in week 6, you're going to run into some issues with the word this. Okay? So we haven't talked about what this is. And I don't want to right now. Because it's not important for what you're doing. But just know, like, write it on a notepad, tattoo it on yourself, like memento style. If you run into an issue with an error function, an issue with an arrow function, or an issue with even a regular function, and you have the word this in there, come talk to me. Right? It's not going to happen today, and it won't happen until like next Wednesday. So I don't want you to think about that right now. Okay. So that's all the arrow functions are. If you have if you have only one input, so just return +1. I'll just call this +1. Like maybe I have a function called +1 that given a number, like given the number a, returns back a plus 1. If my function is really just taking a single parameter in, with arrow functions you can do this. Right, so I might go +1 for 100 is 101. Right. Again, do you need to do all this stuff all the time? Not really. Am I going to suggest that you should use arrow functions as much as you can from now on? Absolutely. Right? In your Tiny app, I would recommend set yourself a challenge, write everything with an arrow function. Right? Every one of your function rec res, like we did this morning, or your request response that you're doing as your callbacks, every one of those, turn it into that. Fun challenge. Right? Where arrow functions are particularly useful is as callback functions. Right? Because an arrow function, I can't actually give it, like I can't keep it somewhere. Like I can't name it anything and keep it. So as soon as I make an arrow function, it just disappears. It's like, phew. The only way that we can use arrow functions is either to save them to variables or to pass them as callback functions inline. Cool? Okay, so what I might do in my code here is I might take people length and I might go const get people length equals this arrow function. And since I'm just returning people length, I could take this and shorten it a bit. Same thing might happen with say hello to best friends maybe, is like I might go const say hello to best friends equals, and then I'm just going to write it this way. Right? At the moment, maybe there's not a huge benefit from it, but I want you to get into the practice of doing it. So we've got arrow functions now. Oh, check. Okay. In the last 2 minutes, we'll do destructuring objects and spread syntax. The reason I left this to the end is because they're really cool, but they're not particularly useful for you right now. So if there's anything that, like, before I show you this, if there's anything that I want you to focus on, it's the for of, let and const, and the arrow functions. Right? String interpolation is cool, like you can play with it. But these three here are the ones that I actually want you to work with. Destructuring objects. So there isn't an example, there's sort of an example here. Basically, if I have const pizzas is cheese, pepperoni, and pineapple, I don't have a first pizza right now, and I don't have a second pizza. If I wanted the first and the second pizzas, I'd have to go const first pizza equals like pizzas 0. And then I'd have to do that for the second and the third, and that's just annoying. So instead, ES6 lets us do this. Const first pizza, second pizza, or whatever you want to call it, third pizza, however many, equals pizzas. And that's legal. They put this into ES6. Now I have a variable called first pizza, which is cheese, and second pizza, which is pepperoni. It's just nice, so instead of having to do this on multiple lines, I can do this on one line. Right? If I wanted the first, second, and the third pizzas, then I would go first pizza, second pizza, and whatever else I want. And the third one is going to be the third pizza. This idea works with objects as well. So if I had an object that went const obj equals a is boo, and b is bra, and c is honorable C note, and I want to grab particular things from this, I actually get to use exactly the same syntax as this, except I replace the square brackets curlies. Right? I have to use the right name. And then what I write on the inside here are the keys that I want to pull. So maybe I want to grab A and C. Right? Notice at the moment A is not a variable, and B is not a variable, and C is not a variable. But when I do this, now A is boo and C is honorable C note. Destructuring objects. Right? It's just a nice way to like reach into objects or arrays and just pull the things that you want. Right? Again, you could do this on multiple lines if you wanted to. You don't have to do this, but it looks cool. If you want to set like a bit of a challenge for yourself for TinyApp, it's maybe try to use something like this somewhere. Are there any questions about this one? Cool. So I might go to things like first person and second person, and I might say, hey, first person, second person, just pull out from people. And again, my code ends up running the exact same way. Okay. Very, very last thing is spread syntax. Say that I had, like, say I meet a bunch of new friends. These are like the people that I knew before, but I also make soccer friends. Soccer friends are Alan and Janissa and Brian. Do I already have? I do have Brian. Well, there's another Brian. And maybe I'll also make pinball friends. Might be Steve. Sup, Steve? Yeah. It might be Brenda and Deborah. Did I hear you right, Deborah? Something like that. I might want to merge all my friends together. How would I merge these friends together? And I might need to push them into the people, right? If I want to go like const all friends, I want all friends to be my like people plus soccer plus pinball. Am I going to need to use a particular kind of thing to do that? So you said it push, but how do I push all of them in? I would need to loop through each one. And that's just extra stuff that I have to think about. To do a for loop to go through stuff, I just want to join two arrays. Huh? So I can do things like add, I think 1, 2, 3 plus like 4, 5, 6. But that gives me this. And that's not what I want, right? There is a concat or something, or like, there's a concat. But imagine I wanted to concat 3 things, then I have to go concat, like 7, 8, 9, just to get 3 arrays stuck together, like concat, concat, concat. So what JavaScript says now is, hey, you want all your friends to be your people plus your pinball friends plus your soccer friends? Here's what you can do. People. Soccer friends. Pinball friends. All right, let me zoom out a little bit just so that's in one line. 3 dots, people. 3 dots, soccer friends. 3 dots, pinball friends. 3 dots is called spread syntax. Spread. I always think of the spreading as like when you're scraping or spreading like butter over toast. Right? Just spread it out. So this is, hey, get me all the people. Get me all the soccer friends. Get me all the pinball friends. They're all put together. And if I console log like all friends afterwards, I got all my friends all in one array. Cool. Didn't have to write a for loop. Didn't have to write a for loop. Do you see what I mean by like we find better ways of expressing ourselves? people just said, hey, listen, I need to join arrays, like join arrays all the time. And the JavaScript people said, okay, fine, you don't have to write for loops anymore. Here it is. This thing does it for you. Right? Spread syntax. Does spread syntax work with objects too? Absolutely. So here's an object, const obj is all these sounds, and then maybe const new sounds is this was going to be D is Wii U, and then E is going to be haha. Maybe I want to make an object that has both of those sounds. OBJ, new sounds. And it merges the objects together. Right? So, every single thing that I showed you today, you don't need to get everything. Right? The only ones that I want you to focus on are arrow functions, using const and let, and playing a little bit with the special for loops. The other ones are like stretch for now, but maybe make some time to explore them a little bit, and you'll get more and more comfortable with them over time. So say that this one has D is honorable C note. When I do OBJ and new sounds, what would you want it to do? So it actually just takes the most, like the last one, right? So OBJ and new sounds, it means, all right, well, I'll keep the D for new sounds, right? That's all. Great question. So just mess around with all this stuff. The example that I did, I know it was a bunch of stuff mashed together. I'm going to give you that, but I'm also going to give you, I have a script that has every single one of these concepts with a single example at a time, right? Then it's labeled and you can dig through that. I'll also give you the slides. Sound good? Cool. Have a great rest of the day. Enjoy tomorrow's lecture and enjoy Tiny App. Man, what a good week. Thanks, y'all.